Alright, so here I started off sanding now the side trims that go over the radio and the climate control as well. I also took some time to spray them over, but started off with sanding with about 800 grit paper and then 2000 grit to make it better after I used the primer. So here I'm using the primer to just get it ready for the paint. Alright, so I'm gonna let it sit and dry for a little bit. I have the heater on this side. It's gonna dry off, and then I'm gonna focus on getting the interior started. Let's get into it. Alright, welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be, I guess, doing like wrapping all of this little section of the car, replacing this air unit frame right here, and then also, what else? Yeah, wrapping all of these little plastic frames that go over the head unit. Yeah, and then just seeing how things are gonna turn out. So I'm gonna do my best to wrap it. I'm gonna later get the fabric to wrap the dash, and then we'll get it started. So for now, join me as we start working on the car. Over here, I am just talking about how I was going to take off the top of the CarPlay unit and then try to measure how well it will fit. It did fit, so I started taking measurements for the wrap and then trying to install it onto all the parts I wanted it to go on. It was pretty easy to work with. It wasn't too bad, but it took me a while to kind of get used to how fiddly it was, and then use some of the heat gun to go over it. But overall, pretty good job. Alright, so I had to pause and finish everything because my phone died, but I installed the CarPlay, so it looks like very beautiful. I have to buy the battery to put it back in the car and then start it off to see what it looks like. Whew, super cold in here, but so far this is what it looks like. Take off the key. I like the way it looks. The carbon fiber looks pretty decent. I don't like the way I did so much. So I left a little bit of chrome here, but it looks okay, not too bad. The next step is to buy some Alcantara fabric, wrap up the steering wheel, do the dash, just the top here, and then yeah, see how everything turns out. So I didn't realize I lost audio, but basically I turned on the car and the CarPlay wasn't working for a bit because I hadn't disconnected it from my other car because it was still running. So when I tried to connect it, it wasn't working. I went to the settings. Later I found out that that's what I had to do, turn off and disconnect the one from my car for the one in this car to work. Alright, so I don't know if you can hear me, but my estimations were right. The CarPlay works. It wouldn't work before because it kept connecting to my car, the E39, and it wouldn't connect to my phone now. But now it works. Everything works perfectly fine. If I play music, you should hear it, I think. Let's see. So everything works, map works. If I put my work address in, beautiful, everything works. So right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna finish up sanding panels. That goes to the side trims. I meant not the panels, and then I'm going to put everything back, and we should be kind of 50% through the interior. And then the next thing we're gonna do is wrap all this part of the steering wheel and see what we can do next. So let's get it. Alright, so after sanding them down with a couple layers of the black paint, I went over to sand them again and added more layers of the black paint onto the trims. Some of them had a lot of orange peel, some of them didn't, so it took me a while to kind of figure out that situation, but Overall, pretty good. I had my heater on to make the process a little faster for me, and then I applied clear coat. I think over here I'm applying clear coat to get everything shining pretty well. I was rushing. I never would encourage anyone to rush on a project like that, but I was rushing. I literally started working on the bumper. At this point, the Bondo had where it covered up all the gaps that I had, and I sand it down. It looks pretty good. Uh, there was a bit of dent in the top part of the bumper where my hand is, so I had to kind of warm it up and then push the dent out. It worked perfectly fine. In the next video, you're gonna see I fitted the bumper and everything, and it looks good. Alright, at this point I added a little bit more Bondo just because I wanted everything to just be covered up very well and so the sanding was even. So I just kept on, adding a few bit touches to each side. Here was the much difficult part where the lower part of the bumper had cracked and was initially cut and some botched kind of job was done, so I had to fix that with Bondo. Alright, so at this point I was installing the trims back. I had to install the hazard light as well, but it took me a while to put in, like 2 minutes, but I was able to put it in after. The trims, I realized after installing them that maybe black wasn't the best color, but it still kind of works better, and maybe I might change the color on the dash to make it fit. Alright, at this point I had bought a new battery, installed it, and I was wanting the car to start on its own power because up until this point I kept jumping the car to start it. My audio went out here too, but I was basically explaining that when I started the car, it was kind of rough, it's shaking a bit, but after I let it run for a minute, everything just was fine. I turned it off and started it again, and everything was working amazing. Alright, at this point I started working on trying to install my frames back. So it's me sanding off the metal so I can make contact with the welder when I installed this part on the car. So I just went ahead and started cleaning all the parts to make sure they were ready for that project. Alright, so before this video, I had bought two other welders, one stick welder and a MIG welder. Both of those didn't work for me, so I went back on Amazon and I got this one, which is like the first one I got, to be honest, stick welder. This is me setting everything up and then just getting ready to, use it, try it, make sure that I sanded everything once again. I was ready to test it out, but it took me a while to just get the fitment right so everything is perfect. Alright, so after a couple of tries, I realized this thing wasn't working the way I wanted it to work before, but it's because I didn't have the experience. I was still trying to figure out how to work with this thing, so I kept sanding a lot of the parts off, and eventually, ta-da! It still wasn't working. So I kept playing around with it, and then eventually it started working, and you see that later in the video. And I had to kind of figure out how to use it because um, a few things weren't working very well for me. At this point, I was just working on welding the frame back as I'd finished straightening out the parts I needed to straighten out. It took me a while, but I was able to figure out how to use the welder. It's not very perfect, but it got the job done. Alright, so over here I was going to turn everything lined up with the front radiator, and then I had to sand down parts of the frame over there to make sure that I had enough conduction for the welder. Also, I realized that parts of the frame were not very straight in the front, that held onto the radiator. So I had to move them around to make sure that everything lined up at least close enough so that when I put the bumper and the headlight back on, everything will fit like a glove. Over here I finished up everything on the right side, just doing a few more touches to make sure that everything was strong, and then I'll get ready to put everything back and make sure that all of the measurements fit.